Hello there, this is Blazing Steel from Tripmine Entertainment, and today I'll be going through a operator review guide for Rainbow Six Siege. Now first, to kick this video series off, I think we'll start with an operator which is probably one of my favourites that are in the game right now, and that is the attacking Spetsnaz operator, Fuze. Now Fuze is armed with cluster charges. He gets 3 of these little babies that he can put onto any wall which can be breached. Now, when these devices are placed on the wall, they shoot out kind of explosive hockey pucks. He shoots 4 of these out each cluster charge, and they go from a left to right fashion. And before we get into how that kind of cluster charge can be useful, we should probably get into Fuze's kit. Now, Fuze is fortunate. He has access to 3 primary weapons: the 6P41 light machine gun, the AK-12 assault rifle, the ballistic shield. Then he has access to the standard Russian pistols, the PMM, and the GSH-18. Now when we actually have a look at these individual items, you got the ballistic shield. Now this is your bog standard shield, nothing special, nothing kind of unique to Fuze other than it doesn't actually do anything else. Now I'm someone who's actually quite fond of the ballistic shield, funny enough. I think, especially with Fuze, there are a few different ways that you can kind of couple it with his gadget to make it a bit more useful. But on its base stats, the shield is a shield. You either like it or you don't. There's no other way around that one. Then if you move over to 6P41, it's a decent light machine gun. It's got a, I say, on the higher end of the fire rates, which gives it quite a heavy kind of recoil. So it's something which is quite useful at medium range, can be used at short range in a panic just because it's got that decent fire rate. At long range, it's just not my cup of tea for me. It just doesn't have that accuracy. It just kind of bounces around just a bit too much. I do know a few people who can control it and use it, but it's definitely not a beginner's gun. I think it's something which, if you use it over a lot of time, you kind of get used to the kind of recoil patterns that it kind of offers you. And the last one it has access to, with the AK, is a very solid all-around gun. This would be my standard recommendation if you're picking Fuze. The thing with this assault rifle, it's probably on the harder hitting side of the guns. It definitely packs a punch. I mean, it feels a lot more akin to Thermite's gun rather than some of the faster firing assault rifles in the game. Has a solid 30 round magazine, and as you can see there on the little stats there, packs a good 45 damage. Now, as this is your all-around thing, I think when you're going into a situation, you can rely on this gun to do what you need. When looking at the pistols, it's, again, I say with the pistols, it's all very much down to your personal choice. You either want the gun that packs a bit more damage but has a smaller mag, or you have the gun which packs less damage but has a much larger mag. Personally, I'm fond of the PMM, but I tend to use it as a ballistic shield. So if you're using the AK or the light machine gun, the usefulness of the GSH just to be able to drop a few bullets quickly, that you're not really looking for the damage because you've already put quite a few bullets in the enemy, you just need to finish them off. The GSH could be quite useful. Now, looking at his gadgets, he has access to the breaching charge, which, again, the breaching charge is a little bit irrelevant at this point because of his gadget. You tend to want to be using that rather than the breaching charge, but I mean, for me personally, I take it because I'm not a huge fan of smoke, but I would say the fact that he has smoke does give him that little bit extra versatility that some of the other operators can lack. Now we've kind of had a basic overview of his kit, I should go on a little bit more about how this operator kind of works out. Because the thing is, when you're looking at Fuze, he isn't a must pick. He is what I would call a specialist pick. Is someone who you pick for a certain role, and despite the fact that because he's a big meaty character with that 3 armor, and he can hold his own, he isn't one who's going to be the king of every game. They might get the odd game where you'll kill 5 people with your gadget on your own, but those are very few and very far between. And what I find is very interesting about Fuze, he's someone who's very popular on the lower end tier of ranked. You know, if you're in your kind of bronze through to gold, Fuze is almost like a must pick for like when you look at the stats. Like, he always picked every single round. The opposite side of it though is when you look at the diamond and the platinum ranks, Fuze is pretty much a non-starter. He's not picked at all. And I think I'll kind of go through a few reasons why I think this is. One thing about Fuze is what I would call he's newbie friendly. Because what's very satisfying about Fuze is you can just go up to a wall, put down your gadget and leave it, watch it do its magic, and all of a sudden in the top right you just see the little kills popping through. Now, he works very well when the enemies they either don't know what's happening or they're just not prepared for it. Now you find that a lot in the lower ranks, they don't seem to expect explosives to be ringing out through the objective. However, in ranked, it's almost an assumption that there's going to be a lot of stuff coming in, whether it be grenades, fuse grenades, or even just smoke grenades. They're prepared for stuff to come in, so it's nowhere near as effective. Despite saying that, his gadget can be very useful in a few different ways. I mean, one of the ways which is kind of the obvious everyone thinks of is you get into the objective, you find a wall that hasn't been reinforced, put your fuse grenades in, let them do their work. Now this has kind of a twofold effect. One, if there's anyone who's trying to anchor their objective, they're going to have a very bad time very quickly. And the alternative is, if you're someone who is kind of roaming about, you're thinking, oh, I better get back to the objective. If you start hearing those explosions going off the objective, you're like, nah, I ain't going in there. So it can act as quite a good deterrent. Personally, that's how I use Fuze. I use them as a way to kind of deter the enemy from going where I want. And if I get a few kills on the end of it, you know what, that's a bonus. And my personal loadout for him is, as you can see here, with the ballistic shield and the PMM. You might be thinking, why are you going to use a ballistic shield? Why would you use a ballistic shield, which is basic with no special ability? Now, for me, it's something which I actually use as a secondary line of defense. Now, when you're fusing with Fuze, you can be quite exposed. The thing is, when you put that fusing charge on the wall, your back there is completely open. Now, if you're using the ballistic shield, you put that baby right on your back, and suddenly you're a turtle. And that can only honestly make the difference between life and death. And it's something which, because I find the Russian pistols probably some of the strongest in the game, like that PMM picks 61 damage at close range. I mean, it's a 2-bullet kill at close range, as long as you hit them in the kind of chest area. And it just spraying with that pistol, it might only have 8 bullets, but only 2 of them are going to connect. And when you see the hipfire circle, especially with a laser sight, it's not that difficult to do. So I mean, for me, that's where I sit. And in the event that I'm not using that ballistic shield, the AK is always a good backup for me. It's something which I can use any day of the week, and I know that I can do well with it. With Fuze, he's an operator which doesn't really get bothered much by the other operators. So if you're thinking, oh, who can I synergize Fuze with? On the attacking side, there isn't really a whole lot. It can be helpful to have a Thatcher to take out a few gadgets on the enemy, or a Twitch to take out some of the gadgets and defenders that can prevent your gadget from going off. But in general, you're kind of a solo queuer there. You know, you can go ahead and do what you want without giving a monkeys what anyone else is doing. The one thing you do need to look out for, though, is Jaegers. Now, his magpies can shut your device right down. So before fusing into room, you've got to make sure you drone that thing out and ensure that there ain't anyone sitting there with a Jaeger. If they are, you'll need to get your Twitch or Thatcher in there to go in there and take care of them sharpish, otherwise you're going to have a few issues. In regards to what kind of modes Fuze can be useful on, as a securing the objective, he is a fairly good operator where he can clear out their objective, and he can also deter people from trying to get back into it. Now, on bombs, the thing is with bombs, because bombs cover a much large area, it tends to mean the defenders are much more spread out, which again makes his device just a little bit less useful. The further out the defenders are, the less likely it is they're going to get caught up in your explosions. And hostage, now, I'm someone who, I can turn around, I can pick Fuze, and I can tell you, don't worry guys, I can use him in a good way. Because what you can do with Fuze is you can put him on areas around the hostage, so nowhere near the actual room I'm saying here, but on the corridors outside of it. If you put a Fuze there, often the defenders will be kind of around the area, and all of a sudden you're cutting off ways where your teammates can then use it to flank on in, or in general, you're just kind of clearing it out. But if you're not someone who's played Siege for very long, I would highly suggest staying the hell away from Fuze the minute you see the hostage come up. The main thing is, because these cluster charges, when they go in, they do bounce around all over the place, and it's fairly easy to just fuse and think, oh, you know what, that's fine, mate, there'll be no issues. Suddenly you see it bounce through a doorway, and the hostage is now a big red splat, and you've lost the game. And you do that twice, and you're booted. So I got to be really careful with this guy. As much as I love this guy, and I'd love to turn around and say here he's a clearly 10 out of 10 operator and he's a must pick, he isn't. I'd say he probably sits around in kind of a 6 or a 7 out of 10. He's an operator which can be very good, and in the right hands they can be very deadly. But in general, you've just got to be very careful with this guy. You know, he can do so much damage both to the friendly team, and he can ruin the objective in some cases. And at the end of the day, if he's shut down by one operator, and the Jaeger Magpies do completely shut him down, then he really just is a big heavy dude that's just following you around. Now there's kind of 3 tips I'd like to give for people who are thinking about trying Fuze and just haven't played him in the past, or are just thinking how can I get into this operator, how can I do well with him. And one thing is, make sure you communicate with your team, both giving and taking. With Fuze, if you can get the information from your team to where the enemies are, it means your clusters might actually connect rather than just pinging into a hallway and doing absolutely nothing. And the other side of it is, when those situations do happen where you put it in and nothing happens, or even that you just get a hit marker, make sure you're telling your teammates and let them know what's going on, because Fuze's device can act like an information gatherer. Depending on what happens, you can just let your entire team know what area is safe, inverted commas, and whether it's safe to go in or not. Second point that you need to be aware of when picking Fuze is ensure when you're fusing you are safe. I don't know how many times that has happened to me and how many times I've seen it. When someone jumps in a window, starts planting, and the blast is straight away. Make sure you know what the defenders are doing. Make sure they're not looking out for you, and when you're approaching where you want to fuse, do it crouched, do it quietly, because the minute you start thumping around, if you hear that Fuze putting down his cluster charge, it's honestly just a free kill. There's so many times where a good opportunity is wasted just because people can't bide their time and take a little bit of time to think about how they could approach it, so keep that in mind. My last tip with Fuze is don't forget he can really be useful to kind of screw with the enemy's mind, because nothing shocks the enemy more than having explosions pinging around all around you. And what you can do is put down your cluster charge, leave it for a little while, breaching from another point, and when you blast that cluster charge, they'll assume you've just planted that. And I don't think anything else can muck people up more than just forcing them to deal with both the explosions and the fact that there's a Fuze right around the corner when you're actually on the other side of the point. Well, thank you for listening on my little overview of Fuze and kind of what I thought of the operator. Leave your little comments below on what you kind of think about Fuze. You know, is he useful? Is he a waste of space? How do you use him? And then we can have a little discussion, and hopefully everyone can have a little read and gain a better awareness of the operator. So thank you all for watching, and after this I'm just going to have a few game clips of just myself using Fuze, so you can have a little look on how maybe you can use them too. Thank you, and goodbye.
Stop standing. Neutralize the threat.
Going live.
Op 4 neutralized. Mission successful.
Cluster charge activated. Cluster charge going up. Out of ammunition.
Throwing frag grenade.
Cluster charge going up. Cluster charge going live. Breach charge active.
Resume securing the container once the threat is neutralized. One Op 4. Op 4 eliminated. Stay clear of the blast! secure the room. Protect the biocontainer. Op 4 neutralized. Mission successful.
Placing cluster charge.
Breach charge set. Breach.
Resume securing the container. Securing the room.
EMP incoming.
Cluster charge live. Blowing cluster charge. Cluster charge deployed. Detonating cluster charge.